Oh, it was a good reminder. I kind of needed this today. I was struggling today, quite honestly. I was really having a hard time this morning, and a lot of craziness going on, a lot filling my mind, a lot of worries, a lot of distractions, and it just is crazy. And yet, the message I'm going to share today is not necessarily a happy, feel-good message either. So that was the other thing I was kind of stressed about. You know, these COVID times and difficulties, it's nice to hear the good, fluffy stuff. And yet, God's been laying a different message on my heart that I bring into you today. Go to Joel chapter 1, and there's a few things in the works that I want to tie this into. Obviously, the elections are coming up, and we already know the craziness of society and the craziness of culture. We already know we're struggling with the COVID pandemic. We have the fires raging. And a lot of times you sit back and you wonder, God, what are you doing? God, what are you trying to communicate to us? Is there more happening here than maybe we realize? We begin to say, God, show us so we can clearly understand. And then God reminds me, John, I already have spoken. Go to the Word. You can find your answers there. And as I was praying through this in our culture and our times, this text came to my mind. We're going to look at the book of Joel, and this is a prophet, and the prophet doesn't have necessarily happy words to us, but there is hope in what the prophet shares in the book of Joel. And I believe there's hope for America through these words as well. Go to Joel chapter 1. We're just going to work our way through it. Starting in verse 1. It says, "The word of the Lord that came to Joel, the son of Pethuel. Hear this, you elders, give ear, all inhabitants of the land. Has such a thing happened in your days or in the days of your fathers?" And I step back and I'm thinking, man, the craziness of society around us. Has what's been going on ever happened in my days or the days of my fathers? And I have to start saying, not quite like we're seeing it now. Verse 3, he says, "Tell your children of it, and let your children tell their children, and their children to another generation." In other words, there is a lesson to be learned here from the nation of Israel back in the day that God says, I want for you today even. This is a word and a message to be passed on to generation after generation. What's interesting is the date and writing of this prophecy is unclear. The scholars cannot figure out when Joel wrote this, and I think God did that on purpose because God wants this to be an eternal message for everyone. Best we know, this lines up to the time of the Assyrian Empire's dominance when they came into Samaria of the north and took out the northern part of Israel. During the reign of King Hezekiah, Sennacherib came down and took the northern 10 tribes away, began to work his way down to Israel and wanted to capture, or to Judah, wanted to capture Jerusalem. And King Hezekiah, which we're going to look at his prayer and one of my next sermons, not next week, but the week after, Hezekiah's prayer in light of that. But leaving this open-ended is so that this will be applicable to multiple periods of time and yet be found and based upon some point in history. Secondly, the recipients of this letter of prophecy was to God's people. So the message that comes is not to the unbeliever. The message that comes is not to those that are outside. The message that we're good. There we go. The recipients are God's people. So the point is there, this message comes to us, to Christians, to the church. All age groups, all vocations, for all times. Well, the event that happened, the devastating event that happens, let's look at verse 4. It says, verse 4, "What the cutting locusts left, the swarming locusts have eaten. What the swarming locusts have left, the hopping locust has eaten. And what the hopping locust has left, the destroying locust has eaten." Historically, what happened in the nation of Israel at that time, there was a severe plague of locusts. So much so that they left nothing behind. And I find this historical plague of locusts interesting because locusts have been used all throughout the ancient literature and into the future in the book of Revelation to describe any devastating event that might come and happen upon a people or a nation. As crazy as this is, I want us to read this in context of these fires that have been raging over the West Coast. So I want us to jump to chapter 2 now. And I want us just to read the language here. Chapter 2 of Joel, starting in verse 2. The end of chapter 2, the end of verse 1. For the day of the Lord is coming, it is near. Number 2, a day of darkness and gloom, a day of clouds and thick darkness. Like blackness there is spread upon the mountains. And I know probably for some of the firefighters and for some of us who were locked in, the skies got kind of darker with this smoke. They're still dark from the smoke, and it gets to be pretty bleak and black out there. In context of the nation of Assyria coming in, because this is all contextual still, verse 2, a great and powerful people, their like has never been before, no other be again after them through the years of all generations. And so Joel is drawing from the plague of locusts to apply it to Assyrian Sennacherib coming down. Likewise, we take the plague and we apply it to what we're looking at in our lives, in our culture, in our time today. Verse 5, look at it says, fire devours before them, and behind them a flame burns. The land is like the Garden of Eden before them, but behind them a desolate wilderness, and nothing escapes them. Their appearance is like the appearance of horses, and like war horses they run. As with the rumbling of chariots, they leap on the tops of the mountains, like the crackling of a flame of fire, devouring the stubble, like a powerful army drawn up for battle. Before them, peoples are in anguish. All faces grow pale. Like warriors, they charge. Like soldiers, they scale the wall. They march each on his way and do not swerve from their paths. They do not jostle one another. Each marches in path and burst through the weapons and are not halted. These fires are having a hard time being contained. Any fire breaks that are put in, the fires appear to jump and go beyond. They leap upon the city. They run on the walls. They climb up into the houses. They enter through the windows like a thief. Verse 10, the earth quakes before them. The heavens tremble. The sun and the moon are darkened, and the stars withdraw their shining. For the Lord utters his voice before his army, for his camp is exceedingly great. He who executes his word is powerful, for the day of the Lord is great and very awesome. Who can endure it? Boy, these are not words that we like to hear, nor do we like the thought of, do these words apply to us today? And yet I found myself sitting here as God is telling me to preach on Joel, and I'm arguing with him, and I'm saying, God, are you serious? This is what you want me to bring in the midst of a fire that is raging throughout the West Coast? Don't you want me to bring a word of hope and encouragement? Don't you want to bring me a word that everything's going to be okay? And God said, no. This is what I want you to bring. And then I argued with him some more. I said, there's not going to be anybody in church Sunday. There's not going to be anybody here to even hear it. And God said, preach it. Even this morning as I'm prepping, I'm arguing. I'm saying, God, I got other stuff I can share. I got a song I wrote while I was on vacation I could share with you, and all kinds of things. And I couldn't get away from God saying, you need to preach what I'm giving you to preach. There have been a lot of people that have asked the question, because of everything we're seeing, is it possible that we are seeing judgment from God? Is it possible we are living in the last days? Is it possible that this is God's way of trying to get our attention? And I've said it before. I do believe God's trying to get our attention. Here's the piece that I found interesting. Is this next piece of the puzzle. Back to chapter 1, look at verse 9. because the result of this army, the result of the locusts, was that worship was affected. Worship of God was compromised. That was the result of the plague. Look at verse 9, chapter 1. The grain offering and the drink offering, again, verse 9, chapter 1, the grain offering and the drink offering are cut off from the house of the Lord. The priests mourn, the ministers of the Lord. The fields are destroyed, and the ground mourns because the grain is destroyed. The wine dries up, the oil languishes. Be ashamed, O tillers of the soil. Wail, O vine dressers, for the wheat and the barley, because the harvest of the field has perished. The vine dries up, the fig tree languishes. Pomegranate, palm, and apple, all the trees of the field are dried up, and gladness dries up from the children of man. I find this fascinating because the outcome of this devastation is not the downfall of the economy. The economy is not mentioned here. What is mentioned is the outcome of this is worship was affected. Isn't it crazy what has been affected in America through the pandemic and the smoke? But worship. Look at these three things. The burnt offering, number one. The burnt offering was a symbol. The reason God instituted the burnt offering was because it stood for the dedication of our life to God. They would bring the burnt offering, which would include grain and barley, was part of the burnt offering. They would bring that because it was a sign of their commitment and dedication to God. Secondly, the meal offering, which was a bread, something baked. The meal offering was the consecration then, secondly, of our service to God. And thirdly, the drink offering, and these are the three offerings mentioned here. The drink offering was the joy of serving God with the gifts, blessings, and talents that He's given us. So what was removed or what got in the way was our dedication to God, our service to God, and the joy of serving. And part of what God says is, if you're not going to worship and serve me the way I'm asking you to, then I'm going to take it away. I'm going to take it away. This is what hit me because I had never seen that before until this last week when I was asking God what to talk about. And God said, worship was affected. And worship's being affected today because God's trying to get our attention. Sacrifice, bread, and wine. Does that sound familiar? Sacrifice, bread, and wine. These are the three things that God's highlighting was taken away. That blew me away too. Not something I'd ever seen before until this last week. Because the economy, guys, is secondary. But worship is essential. Worship is essential. Well, you have to ask the question, why is God doing this? Why is God doing this? If we think judgment from God is reserved for the unbeliever, judgment from God is reserved for those who someday will shake their fists at Him in rebellion ultimately, why is God doing this to His people? Why is God bringing this to His church? Now look at chapter 1, go back to verse 5. Verse 5 through 7, it says this, "Awake, you drunkards, and weep, and wail, all you drinkers of wine, because the sweet wine is cut off from your mouth." The implication is, it's almost like they're in the middle of drinking and it gets slapped away. "For a nation has come up against my land, powerful beyond number. Its teeth are lion's teeth, and its fangs of a lioness." This would be a reference then to Assyria, of course, in the context. "It has laid waste my vine and splintered my fig tree. It has stripped off their bark and thrown it down, and the branches are made white." And I hate overthinking things and overanalyzing things. I really do. I hate looking for a demon under every rock. I hate diving into conspiracy theories because they inevitably will lead you astray from what God really wants to do. But I have become convinced that what is at stake in America, what is at stake in these elections, is astronomical. We are being betrayed from within. There is literally a nation that has risen up within our ranks trying to take over the U.S. That is what the agenda videos are all about. Agenda 2. That's what we will be watching these next 2 Wednesdays. And I find this nation rising up in the context here crazy in light of everything else. Because here's the point. We have become dulled in our senses. That's the reference to drunkenness and alcoholism. We have become dulled in our senses. Like drunkards, we've grown sleepy. We've gotten comfortable and lazy. We have become focused on leisure and pleasure and the wrong things rather than the Lord's work. Anna, go to that first slide for me. 2 Timothy. And Paul was writing this to Timothy, and unfortunately, this is in context of the church. He says, "But realize this, that in the last days difficult times will come. For men will be lovers of self, lovers of money, boastful, ungrateful, unloving, without self-control, brutal, haters of good, treacherous, reckless, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God." Does that sound like society today? And the ellipses are because there's other things that Paul listed that I just took out because it was, kept going. Next, lovers of pleasure, lovers of God, holding to a form of godliness, although they have denied its power. And here's what's really sad, is Paul tells Timothy, these are the attitudes and behaviors that will manifest themselves within the church when the last days are upon us. Why is God doing what he's doing? He's trying to get our attention. Secondly, we have stopped being vigilant. The reference to the nation coming and them really not being aware of it. That's the implication here. We have stopped being vigilant. We've stopped being alert and ready. We've stopped paying attention. But this paying attention, God said, I want you to wake up and become alert, not just for yourselves, so that you can save others. The point of waking up and shaking the cobwebs off your heads and getting ready is so that you can help save others. Because we can't save others if we're not being vigilant and if we're not alert. Thirdly, here's the sad one. All this ties into as we have dulled our senses, we have stopped being vigilant, we then allow sin to creep into the church. And that's just it. If we aren't vigilant and awake and alert, we allow things in and we aren't even necessarily noticing it. We've allowed sin to creep into the church. 2 C words I'm going to throw at you. Number 1, through compromise. We compromise and compromise and compromise and compromise. And secondly, we get comfortable. We have been comfortable in America worshiping. We have been, on one hand, we're thankful we aren't in China or other places that are getting persecuted. I am thankful I'm not a pastor in some other country being threatened by my life. But unfortunately, what that has done for the church as a whole, it's made us comfortable. It's made us lackadaisical. It's made us apathetic because we think we're secure, nothing's going to happen to us. Oh, persecution, that's for the Chinese Christians. Persecution, that's for those in Africa. Persecution will never come to us in America. We have our great foundation of liberties. We have our great foundation. Yet what are we seeing today? Worship is being affected, letter D, because worship was already being affected. We've already taken it for granted. We aren't doing it the way that's pleasing to God. That's tainted by sin. Ephesians 4, the next verse I have cross-referenced, is God says this very clearly. He says, we've gotten compromised. We've become comfortable. We've let sin creep in. But that is not the way it's supposed to be with us. Go to the next slide for me, Anna. Because Paul says, so I say this and affirm together with the Lord, you walk no longer just as the Gentiles also walk. Remember, Paul is talking to Christians here. Christians at that day in that church, apparently their lives did not look any different than the unbeliever. And Paul says, don't walk any longer as the Gentiles in the futility of their mind, being darkened in their understanding. Next slide. And they have given themselves over to sensuality, pleasing of the senses, for the practice of every kind of impurity with greediness. And here's what Paul says. Church, you did not learn Christ in this way. Church, why are we living like the world? And God over and over and over, through scriptures primarily, tries to get our attention and warn us. But you know what he did throughout all of Israel's history? When Israel would not listen to God, when Israel would not pay attention to the writings, when Israel would not pay attention to the preachers and the teachers of the day, which would be the prophets and the priests and the Levites, when they stopped it, God said, all right, I got to hit you over the head with a 2x4 to get your attention. And guess what God always did? He brought plague or pestilence upon the land. He caused Jerusalem to be destroyed. He always affected worship, number one, in some way, and the land along with that. Even when they got exiled to Babylon, Jews couldn't worship anymore. Worship was affected. And that's the pattern God used in the Old Testament. And so I have to step back, and I've been stepping back, and I've been praying, and I've been looking, and I've been saying, God, is there more you're trying to tell us? Are we not waking up as we should? Another reason God does this type of stuff, go to the next slide for me, is so that we can stand in the gap and pray. Ezekiel 22, I searched for a man among them who will build up the wall and stand in the gap before me. God is crying out, is there anyone who will stand up and stand in the gap for me? And what does it say? For the land. Go back when you read through it. Notice how many times God talks about the land. How many times he's zealous for the land. Who's going to stand in the gap for me for the land so that I would not destroy it? And here's the sad commentary. Prophet Ezekiel, God says, I found who? He found no one. God says, I'm crying out, is there anyone that will rise up and stand in the gap? Is there anyone who will stand up? Seek me for deliverance. Or are we going to stay locked into what I'm calling the COVID coma? Because that's what I'm sensing and seeing, is COVID has put us into a coma when it's supposed to wake us up. So he sends other things, the riots. He sends the fires, the flames. And I wonder how much more is he going to do to wake us up as a church? I don't like preaching this way. But when we pray, that's what God calls us. Do you remember what Jesus did when he came into the temple and he cleansed it? You know what he said? He said, you have made my house, which should have been a house of prayer, and you've made it a den of thieves. And he cleansed out the money changers. My house is to be a house of prayer for all nations. To pray. Fourthly, that ties in this. Look at Daniel 9, the next slide there in your notes as well. Daniel, you could argue, was the godliest man alive at the time, along with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Daniel, you could argue, was the man standing in the gap. And yet Daniel and his friends were taken in captivity to Babylon because of the sins of the nation. In other words, good, righteous people who were following God and standing up for him were affected by the sins of the whole. And yet Daniel comes in, and you would think if there was one man that didn't have to confess, one man who was good with God, it would have been Daniel. And yet you look here at what Daniel says in Daniel chapter 9, because he is saying, I'm going to stand in the gap, and I'm going to represent and pray for my nation. And you look at what he says. Daniel says, I prayed to the Lord my God and confessed. And before that, he says he was weeping. He was in sackcloth and ashes. He had been fasting. And he says, we. Notice he says, doesn't say they have. Notice he doesn't say the nation has. Daniel says, we have. He associates himself with the sin of the people. Now, you need to understand something. That is exactly what Jesus did for us. That he stood on that cross, and he associated with the sin of the people. He stood here, and he said, I am now a sinner as I have taken on the sins, and now I associate with the people. And he could claim, we have sinned, O God. Jesus would say, forgive us, and my blood will cause the forgiveness. And Daniel does the same thing here. He says, I pray to the Lord, we have sinned. We have committed iniquity. We have acted wickedly. We have rebelled. We have turned aside from your commandments and ordinances. Next slide, Anna. Moreover, we have not listened to your servants, the prophets, who spoke in your name to our kings, our princes, our fathers, and all the people of the land. Daniel says, God has tried to get our attention. We didn't listen. And he throws himself in. The most righteous man at that time threw himself in with everyone else. So what do? Maybe you are in an excellent place with God right now. And if you are, you can be like Daniel. And you could stand in the gap. And you could pray on the behalf of this church, on behalf of Odessa, on behalf of Washington State, on behalf of the U.S., on behalf of the world for that matter. You can stand in the gap for the people. Maybe you're not that person. Maybe today you're realizing, I have missed it and I've become lazy. All you got to do is say, God, forgive me, and agree to stand in the gap. If that's the case, what's the attitude we're to have? Turn back to Joel chapter 1. Back to Joel chapter 1. Looking at verse 8, we're going to jump around a little bit in chapter 1, but I'm going to highlight these verses real quickly. Joel chapter 1, verse 8. It says, lament like a virgin wearing sackcloth for the bridegroom of her youth. In other words, the first attitude you are to have, it's almost like the bride was at the altar getting ready to get married, and she got word that her fiancé was killed in battle. That's the emphasis of that right there. We are to lament and weep like the virgin for the bridegroom of her youth. Secondly, verse 13, 14. Put on sackcloth, lament, O priests, wail, O ministers of the altar. Notice who is highlighted first. Doggone it, the pastors and leaders of the church. We, and I put myself there because I know I have not done what I need to do personally. Priests, ministers of the altar, put on sackcloth and lament. Go in, pass the night in sackcloth. Doggone, instead of us rising up and shaking our fist at society, instead of us getting out there and lambasting BLM or whatever it might be, we should be on our knees praying. We should be on our knees seeking the Lord, and I know I have not. Go and pass the night in sackcloth, O ministers of my God, because the grain offering and the drink offering are withheld from the house of your God. 14, then, here's the piece. He says, consecrate a fast and call a solemn assembly. Gather the elders and all the inhabitants of the land to the house of the Lord the Lord your God, and cry out to the Lord. This third piece of that then is to call everybody within earshot to gather for a solemn assembly of prayer. We are to lament and wail. We are to pant for God, like the beasts of the field after devastation. That's verse 19. Jump to 19. It says, to you, O Lord, I call, for the fire has devoured the pastures of the wilderness, and the flame has burned the trees of the field. For even the beasts of the field pant for you, because the water brooks are dried up. For the fire has devoured the pastures of the wilderness. Our attitude should be like the beasts of the field who are panting for God. Go to the next slide, and not the next one, the one after it. The one after it. The one after it. Psalm 42, as the deer pants for water brooks, so my soul pants for you, O God. My soul thirsts for God, for the living God. When shall I come and appear before my God? My tears have been my food day and night. We're to pant for God. And then he says in chapter 2, verse 12. Chapter 2, verse 12. He says, yet even now declares the Lord, return to me with all your heart, with feasting and weeping and with mourning. And here it is, verse 13. The final point of this section is to rend your hearts and not your garments. You see, they were real good at pouring ashes on their heads and tearing their clothing. But for a lot of them, it was external. A lot of them, it was a show. And God says, I don't want you tearing your clothes for show. I want you truly confessing and repenting from your hearts. So the action, chapter 2, verse 1. Blow a trumpet in Zion, sound an alarm on my holy mountain. Let all the inhabitants of the land tremble, for the day of the Lord is coming. It is near. We blow the trumpet, or we might say we ring the bell. Well, what happened back in the day, and you rang a bell. Everyone would gather to where the bell was being rung because they knew it was an emergency of some sort. Why does the fire department, quote unquote, ring the bell, right? It's the alerts. I mean, we have cell phones now with alerts, or walkie-talkies with alerts, but it's the same mentality. You give the alert so people will jump to action. We need to wake up and shake loose the cobwebs from our head. You know, it was a few weeks back, and some of you were here when I shared the story about our fire alarms going off in the house literally every 20 minutes for like 2.5 hours. It was a Sunday morning, a Saturday night to Sunday morning. And I remember going, God, are you serious? Why is our fire alarms keep going off? You know, and I'm trying to check them. Batteries are okay. I'm vacuuming them to get the dust out, blowing them, get the dust out. I'm taking it apart. I'm trying to figure out why is this. I've taken the batteries out. It still goes off. Oh, it's because the batteries are emergency. It's plugged in. So then I take it off and detach it, put it down, except for then I had to put the batteries back in. So then it went off because the batteries were in. Same fire one. And then finally got that one off, and guess what? It went off again. It was 5 or 6 times in the course of the night. I'm literally sitting there. You know what my wife said about the 3rd or 4th time? She said, John, is God trying to get our attention? Is he trying to wake us up because we're supposed to pray about something? And of course I'm like, no, we're going to go back to sleep. I got to preach in about 3 hours. Of course, they went off like 2 more times. Well, guess what happened? We're on vacation. We're at the ranch. 4:30 in the morning. My first thought was, why are the kids knocking on the trailer? They know they can just come in. They were staying in the cabins at the camp we were at. The kids know why are they knocking? My wife goes, we're in bed. My wife, because I'm trying to wake up, right? I'm trying to get my brain going. My wife goes, come in. And I'm going, no. I hop out of bed, and I go over, and I open the door, and I have this bright flashlight in my face. We're in evacuation 3. You need to get out of here right now. And I'm like, what? What are you talking about? This is tribal police. You got to get out of here right now. And he's panicked. I'm like, what? He goes, the fire's right over there. And I put my head out, and you saw the orange rim of the fire. This was the Omak fire coming down. The orange rim as it's starting trying to crest the hill over there. And I'm like, ah! And he goes, are you the caretakers? No. And my brain's going crazy. Are you the caretakers? No. Where are the caretakers? Are you the only ones here? No, we got probably 6 families here. He goes, you need to get out of here now. And he goes, where's the caretaker live? And I'm like, over there, that apartment over there, the caretaker's over there. And he shines his light over there. That person over there. And I go, probably, because I couldn't tell who it was. Fortunately, it was actually the daughter of the caretaker, but still, he went over there. And you're all panicked, It's crazy. And you're like, I'm thinking, oh, crud, am I going to lose my trailer? That was my first thought. Am I going to have to leave my trailer here with all our stuff? Not, can I get everybody to safety? Isn't that bad? Seriously, isn't that bad? We got to get everybody to safety. Oh, I'm going to lose my trailer. Oh, God, forgive me. So we're frantically, and I'm like, how much time do we have? And by then, the tribal police already left. How much time do we have? A level 3 evacuation means evacuate now, but it could be 15 minutes. It could be a half an hour. It could be an hour, right? How much time do we have? Oh, we're frantically getting around. Then we're like, what do we do? A couple of the families with young kids, really young kids, babies on up. Their camp was ending Monday morning anyway, so they went ahead. One was from the west side, one was from Idaho. They went ahead and just packed up and just left. The rest of us who were there, some of the ones who were there had family relations there. The grandparents are the one that run and own the camp. And so they're wanting to stay to help defend it. They're wanting to stay to figure out what can we do, right? And so they're frantically, and we got teenagers there now with our kids and stuff, and we're just like, what do we do? I said, you know what? I'm going to take all the kids. This is the short story. We're going to take all the kids with us that are left. We're going to go to Grand Coulee. We're going to hang out there for now until we can figure out what in the world's going on. So we gathered them. There were 2 other family kids with us. We went to Spring Canyon campgrounds where we went, just to wait things out. But there's no cell phone service at the campground. So we're literally there, what's going on, and we just waited until we were able to finally get, one of the moms went up and got cell phone service, and we finally contacted. But it's that thing of, wake up, alert, are you ready? And I couldn't help when God said, John, I've sent you 2 fire alarms. Are you listening to me? And I had to admit, even this morning, as I was fighting and wrestling with God, I had to humbly say, okay, Lord, you know what? Okay. I'm going to say what you want me to say. And I need to start doing what you're calling me to do. And I'll be honest with you guys, I have not been praying as much as I used to or should. But the call is not just for me, it's for all of us. We're going to watch, I know we're late, guys, I'm sorry. We're going to watch this video and then I'll wrap up. Anna, if you can go to that Facebook video, go ahead and play this video, please.
Prayer has always preceded revival. In fact, there has never been a recorded spiritual awakening in history without prayer. The most dramatic revival in all of Scripture is recorded by the prophet Jonah as he is sent to preach in the city of Nineveh. And as a result of the people turning to God in prayer...
Oh, of course, our internet's going to hang up on us, isn't it? Okay, I'll summarize it. It's okay, Anna. Basically, he goes in to show every great revival around the world. Africa, China, the Alaskan area, Hebrides, in the U.S. Every great revival around the world began with people gathering together to pray. That's the summation of it. Oops. That was a summation of the video. There, that saved us a couple minutes. So what I'm calling, the point of this and what I'm calling is, there are other groups around the U.S. doing something similar. There's one called, I have it in my notes here, just a second. It's in your notes too, I think. So, Dana Coverstone, I'm still up in the air at whether the stuff he's gotten is legit or not. But what he has done is he has called what's called the Watchman's Trumpet. And this past Friday and Saturday in Texas, he called a sacred assembly to pray for our nation. The return is coming up. That's by Jonathan Cahn, September 26th. Next Saturday, he's calling the nation in Washington, D.C. to gather together for a sacred assembly to pray. I'm doing the same thing in Odessa, but I'm going to do it on September 25th. Here's the reason. This is a Friday night. September 25th, Friday night, is 40 days before the election. I'm going to call Odessa and anybody who wants to come here Friday night at 7 p.m. to pray. And here's what I find interesting. There's no football games to get in the way. I will tell you this. If I try to plan a prayer meeting on a Friday night during football season, do you think anybody would come? Maybe. Some people talk about sports being our God. So the question is, I'm going to do this. I'm quote unquote redeeming for this season of time Friday nights. And I'm calling anybody who will come to the church on Friday nights. This first one will be 7 to 9 because it'll be the kickoff on the 25th of September. We're going to call it Prayer and Praise. I don't have a give. That's just what I titled it because I had nothing else to title it other than a sacred assembly. But the point is, we're going to come. We're going to sing some songs. We're going to pray. We will have specific things to pray for and about. And we're going to gather, and we're just going to seek God on behalf of the nation. That's what we're going to do. And I am challenging everyone, encouraging everyone to come. God's response at the end there, I'll go through this real quickly. In the letter A, Joel tells us that he is gracious and compassionate. Joel tells us that he may just turn and leave a blessing. I love this hope in this. He says, hey, if we do this, he's gracious. He'll leave a blessing if we turn. He's zealous for the land and will have pity. And here's what Joel says. God will make up for the years the locusts have stolen. Read it in Joel chapter 2. That's where that comes out of, the rest of Joel chapter 2. So here's the rest of the story. We got out. We got a call that said the winds had shifted. And the ranch was no longer in danger. And we could go back. We took all the kids back to the ranch. And by that afternoon, Monday afternoon going into evening, there was no power. No, the power had been knocked out. So we decided the first thing we did when we got back, the first thing we did is we got together with everybody that we could, and we said, let's pray. To pray to thank God for protecting the ranch, to keep praying for the firefighters. We got together to pray, and I am not kidding you. In the middle of our prayer, one of the cabin's lights came on. The power went up. But here's what's weird. It was the only one. The rest of the ranch still had no power. It was the weirdest thing. And God's, okay, I'm going to give you a little blessing in the midst of this. I'm going to let you guys have a little power so you can go potty and take showers, because it was a cabin, one of the cabins. Because you were honoring me with prayer. And that is truly what I felt and got from that. The rest of the camp was down. They were hoping to get the irrigation going so they get the sprinklers going. While we were gone, they'd already dissed a field, to try to get a fire break. It was crazy. In the middle of it, all of a sudden, poof, it goes on. But it was like, why is that the only cabin on? That's weird. We found out later why. It's in our story, but still. God left a blessing for us. And they continued. And by the next day, we woke up the next morning. It was crystal clear. Blue skies, hardly smoke to be seen. It was the weirdest thing. It was like we were in an oasis moment. And everything else, you could see the smoke out there. You could see the smoke coming from Davenport. You could see, and yet here we were, blue skies. It was crazy. Still praying for the ranch because there's still issues. They found out later as they went out and drove around, the fire got to about 3 miles within the ranch. It was about how close it got, which, any minute it could have just gone, swept through. But I do believe God honored our prayer. And I believe God will honor ours if we will just seek him. Here's the closing verse, and then our closing song. Go to the next slide. God says it this way. He says, 2 Chronicles 7:14, this is the time of Solomon. Solomon just built and is dedicating the temple. Solomon prays, and God responds with this. If I shut up the heavens so that there is no rain. Who shut up the heavens? God did. If I command the locusts to devour the land. Oh, interesting. There's locusts again. Who commanded the locusts? God did. Or if I send pestilence among my people. Who again? God. Why? God's trying to get our attention. And my people who are called by my name humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways. Next slide. Then will I hear from heaven, will forgive their sin, and will heal their land. Now my eyes will be open and my ears attentive to the prayer offered in this place. This is the dedication of the temple in Jerusalem. And God is saying, I am here and I am listening. Will you come and pray? Yes, I've had to get the 2x4 out. Yes, I've had to get your attention, but I'm here to listen. Will you come? Because it's not his heart to send destruction. It's not his heart to destroy. His heart is life and peace and blessing. But when we strayed, sometimes you got to break our legs to get us back home. If my people, and that's what I'm calling, the worship team will come Friday nights, starting at 7 on the 25th, not this Friday, next Friday. Oh, wait, that is next Friday. So, yeah, Friday after. Friday after. Heavenly Father, Lord, I pray you stir our hearts, oh God. Lord, we may be in a place where things are great with you, and I thank you and praise you for that. But we may be in a place, though, God, where we need to wake up. Our senses have been dulled. We've allowed sin to creep in. Father, forgive us and help us to come and gather to seek you, not just ourselves, but to seek you for the people of this great nation. Let us turn our hearts back to you. Let us confess our sins so that you can come and heal our land.